You must be Elena.
I unlocked the door to my penthouse and found two strangers sipping tea in my living room like they owned the place. The man looked up first, cup in hand. His smile was polite, but his eyes were cold. The woman beside him placed her spoon on the saucer with a soft click, like a gavel striking bone. On the glass coffee table sat a stack of papers, neatly clipped. At the top, property transfer agreement. My home's address was typed below. I didn't move. The hallway behind me still smelled of elevator grease, someone else's cheap perfume and cold rain clinging to my coat. I had just flown back to Brighton Bay after a grueling business trip. I wanted silence, sleep, and the familiar weight of my own bed. Instead, I had strangers breathing my air. The man rose and extended his hand like a host greeting a guest. He introduced himself as Howard Mills, said he and his wife had just moved in, said everything had been arranged by Brielle. My sister's name hit the floor like a cold coin. I blinked, heart pounding, throat locking. I scanned the room. The paintings had been moved. The ceramic vase I placed by the bookshelf, gone. A gray wool scarf lay on my favorite chair. Not mine. It felt like someone had rewritten my life while I was gone. I said this was my apartment. I said I didn't know who they were. I asked them to leave. The woman glanced me up and down, her voice syrupy. "Sweetheart, we have the paperwork." I stepped to the table, eyes tracing the lines. Brielle's name, a brokerage firm, a signature disturbingly close to mine. My stomach clenched. I called my mother. She picked up before the first ring finished. Her voice was sharp. "Elena, not this again." I said there were strangers in my house. I begged her to come. My father grabbed the phone. "You're always imagining things," he said. "You've caused enough trouble." I stared at the strangers, still seated, still sipping tea. I insisted I had the deed, the mortgage, everything. My father replied flatly, "Paperwork changes, and it has changed." I hung up. My fingers were numb. I wanted to scream, but I knew screaming would only prove their point. They wanted me to look unstable. The door clicked. My parents walked in, followed by Brielle, all coordinated like a theater troupe. Brielle wore white. Her makeup was delicate, her smile weaponized. She greeted the strangers, introduced them as guests, told me they were helping transition the apartment for her and Callum. Callum? I asked who that was. My mother scoffed. "You don't need to know. Just stop ruining things." I turned to my father. "Did you know about this?" He didn't meet my eyes. "Brielle's getting married. She needs stability. You'll be fine. You always land on your feet." I had heard that all my life. You'll be fine. So I stayed silent, so I gave, so I faded. Not anymore. I tried calling Maeve, my grandmother. No answer. I asked where she was. "She's old, confused. Stay out of it," my mother snapped. I looked around. My memories had been erased, replaced with curated lies. I turned to Brielle. She gently touched her stomach. "You're stressed again, Elena. Maybe you should rest or call your therapist." They were stripping me of my voice and giving me labels instead: paranoid, unwell, obsessive. I took a deep breath. If I screamed, I'd be crazy. If I cried, I'd be unstable. So I did the last thing they expected. I stepped back and smiled. "I understand," I said, quietly. Relief swept their faces. Brielle almost sighed. They thought I was surrendering. As I pulled my suitcase into the hallway, the door clicked shut behind me. The lock sounded like a final verdict. I stood alone. The lights buzzed. The air smelled sterile. My hands trembled. But I wasn't crying. I wasn't broken. Not yet. I closed my eyes, picturing Maeve's steady gaze. If she wasn't answering, something was wrong. If they dared go this far, they thought I'd stay quiet. They were wrong. I turned toward the elevator, each step steadier than the last. They thought I was alone, but I had something stronger than rage. I had a plan. They thought I would disappear quietly. Instead, I checked into a modest hotel 2 blocks from the waterfront, the kind with too much bays and windows that didn't fully shut. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, counting every reason not to scream. By dawn, I stopped trying to make sense of emotions. I reached for what I knew best: facts. I opened my laptop and began tracing my life backwards. My inbox was cluttered with promotional garbage, but deeper down, I found what I needed: the last mortgage update, a tax notice, and a notification from the property registry, all dated before my trip. But something wasn't right. The mailing address had changed. I never approved that. Next, I called the bank. I asked them when and how my mailing address was updated. The clerk on the line, cheerful, unaware, said they received a signed form and ID scan requesting the change. They had the client's signature on file. I asked to see it. They refused, citing policy. I didn't argue. I thanked her. I hung up. My hands were cold again. It wasn't just deception, it was a plan, thought out, timed, and executed while I was away. They'd rerouted my documents, my identity, my voice. I needed someone who understood systems the way I did, someone smart, fast, and vicious when necessary. I texted Harper Wells. Harper wasn't a friend, she was something rarer, a professional favor unforgotten. Years ago, I'd helped her expose a silent fraud case inside her old law firm. She owed me, and I knew she'd pay her debts in full. She replied in 2 minutes. "Come to my office, now. Bring everything." At noon, I sat across from her in a high-rise downtown, my fingers wrapped around a cup of untouched coffee. She listened, didn't interrupt. When I finished, she leaned back, clicked her pen twice, and said, "You're not paranoid. You're under siege." That was the first time I breathed properly in days. She asked for full access: property records, emails, ID copies, any legal history. I handed her a flash drive and a hard copy file. Then I told her about something I'd never shared before, not even with Brielle. The penthouse wasn't entirely mine. It was part of a discretionary trust fund set up by my grandmother, Maeve, years ago. The trust had one core rule: the beneficiary must remain financially independent and must never use the property as leverage in debts, marriage, or family disputes. The clause was strict. It was meant to protect. I hadn't told anyone because I feared exactly this: greedy hands stretching for what they never earned. Harper's eyes lit up. "This trust, it's your anchor. They don't even know they've stepped on a legal landmine." I nodded slowly. Then I told her something worse. Maeve hadn't answered my calls, she hadn't texted back, and she always did, even when her hands hurt, even when she was tired. She never stayed silent. Harper stared at me. "You think they've silenced her?" "I think they've moved her," I said, "somewhere they can control." By evening, we were on the highway. Maeve had moved to a coastal town called East Haven a year ago. Peaceful, cloudy, and remote, she liked the ocean air and silence. But the address I had now led us not to her cottage, but to a private care facility hidden behind manicured hedges and iron gates. They said she was inside, under memory care, that she had cognitive decline, that she didn't take visitors without pre-approval. Harper flashed her badge. I signed 5 forms, showed my ID twice, said I was next of kin, lied through my teeth. We were let in. Maeve sat in a wheelchair by a window, her face turned toward the sea. Her hair was thinner, but her posture was regal. Her fingers twitched as she recognized my footsteps. "Elena," she said, her voice papery but steady, "you took your time." I fell to my knees beside her. "You're not confused?" Her laugh cracked through the silence. "I've been called senile since I turned 70. Let them think it." She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a flash drive. "I've been recording everything. They think I forget. I remember everything." I stared at her, at the steel behind her wrinkles. She told us how Brielle had visited weeks ago, sweet and apologetic, with legal documents and lies about keeping Maeve safe. Then the facility took over. Her phone was limited, her mail rerouted, but Maeve had already contacted a private investigator. His name, Silas Reed. Harper scribbled the name instantly. "They want to erase me," Maeve whispered, "but they don't know they raised a risk analyst, and I don't lose what's mine." I looked out the window at the gray sea. We weren't outnumbered anymore. We were a triangle, sharp, precise, ready to cut. Maeve took my hand. "Let's not stop them. Let's watch them bury themselves." I nodded. "Tomorrow we go home, not to knock, to strike." The reservation was for 6 o'clock at a high-end seafood restaurant overlooking Brighton Bay. Brielle's choice, of course. The private dining room had floor-to-ceiling windows, gold accents, and just enough soft jazz to feel important. I arrived last. I wore navy blue, no jewelry, no anger on my face, just eyes trained to observe. They were already seated. My parents, Brielle, and a man I'd never met, but recognized instantly, Callum Pierce. He was tall, poised, radiating the kind of false charm you learn from boardrooms and backrooms, a corporate predator wrapped in cologne and expensive tailoring. "Elena," he greeted, rising, "we finally meet. I've heard so much about you." I gave him a glance and a nod. I didn't sit yet. Brielle stood to hug me. Perfume, sugar, tension. She held my hand like we were children again, like we shared secrets and not betrayal. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I know things got confusing." My mother chimed in. "We're just glad you're finally listening to reason." My father poured wine like he was baptizing the room. I took my seat. I didn't drink. "Let's clear the air," began Callum, lacing his fingers. "There's no need for tension. We're all family here." He smiled like a hostage negotiator. Harper, sitting beside me in sleek black, opened her leather folder. She didn't smile. Maeve arrived 10 minutes later, slow but deliberate. She wore a steel gray coat and carried a cane she didn't need. Her presence sliced the atmosphere in half. "Didn't know we had a guest," my mother muttered. Maeve sat beside Harper, ignored the pleasantries, and faced the table like a judge. I took a breath. Time to bait the hook. "So," I said, calm, "tell me again how the apartment became yours." Brielle blinked. "We, filed the paperwork. It was all above board." My father jumped in. "We coordinated with your travel schedule. You knew." "I knew," I repeated. "Interesting." Harper tilted her head. "Then perhaps you can clarify which notary witnessed the transfer." "Brighton Financial Services," Brielle said too quickly. "Curious. They closed their notary office last year." A flicker, a twitch in Brielle's smile. Maeve leaned forward. "And the signature, the one that looks like Elena's, was that signed before or after she landed in Tokyo?" The room went still. Brielle's hand trembled slightly. Callum interrupted smoothly. "We can all agree there may have been procedural problems. The intention was always good, to protect the family." Maeve's laugh was dry. "That's your defense? Good intentions forged my granddaughter's name?" My mother snapped. "No one forged anything. We made arrangements." "For who?" I asked. "For Brielle or for Callum's debts?" Callum's eyes hardened. "That's enough." But Harper pulled out her final card. A USB drive. She plugged it into a tablet and hit play. The room filled with static, then a voice. Brielle's voice. "Hi, yes, I'm Elena Carter. I'd like to request a change of address." My mother froze. My father swore. Callum stood, but Maeve raised one hand. "Sit down, Mr. Pierce. You're not leaving." "You recorded my sister?" Brielle whispered, horrified. You impersonated me, and the bank logs everything." Harper folded her hands. "This recording, along with falsified documents and redirected mail, is enough for fraud charges, but that's not all." Silas entered the room silently. He placed a manila folder on the table. Inside, bank records, shell company names, a flow of money from my parents' joint account to one of Callum's project funds. Callum's face didn't change, but his pulse throbbed in his neck. My father stood up. "We're done here." Maeve tapped her cane. "We are not." "I will not be threatened," my mother began. "You already were," Maeve interrupted, "by your own desperation." Brielle sobbed. "I didn't know it would go this far." I stared at her. She used to cry when we fought over toys. She cried when I outscored her. She cried to win. But this time, no one was clapping. Outside the glass doors, 2 plainclothes officers stepped in. Calm, professional, expected. Callum clenched his jaw. "You called the cops?" "No," I said. "I invited witnesses." They approached the table. One addressed Callum by name, another asked to speak with my father in private. Maeve turned to me. "Would you like to say anything else?" I stood, looked at all of them. "No house is worth this, but dignity is. You stole from me, lied about me, rewrote my name, my voice, my sanity, and now you'll answer for it." Callum's smile finally cracked. "You'll regret this." "No," I said, "you will." I turned to Harper, nodded once. Then I walked out, heels steady, spine tall. I didn't look back, because the trap had already closed. The restaurant didn't explode into chaos the way movies promised. It unraveled, slowly, quietly, with the sound of people realizing there was nowhere left to hide. The 2 officers stood beside the table, not touching anyone yet, just close enough to change the air. Authority doesn't need to shout, it simply arrives. My father's confidence drained first. His shoulders slumped. His voice cracked as he tried to laugh it off. He said this was all a misunderstanding, a family disagreement blown out of proportion. He said we could fix this privately. No one responded. My mother reached for Brielle's hand, squeezing hard, as if pressure could rewrite the past. "She didn't mean it," she said, pointing at me. "Alina's always been dramatic. She exaggerates." One of the officers looked at her, expression neutral. "Ma'am, impersonating someone to alter banking records is not exaggeration." Brielle began to shake, not violently, just enough to be noticed. Her eyes darted from my face to Callum's, searching for reassurance. She didn't find it. Callum finally spoke, voice low and measured. "Let's be clear. This apartment situation is unfortunate, but dragging law enforcement into a family matter is unnecessary." Maeve turned her head slowly toward him. "You're right," she said. "This stopped being a family matter the moment money started moving." Silas opened the folder again and slid a document across the table. He said, "These transfers were made from your parents' joint account," he said calmly, "routed through 2 holding companies, then funneled into a development firm under Mr. Pierce's control." Callum's jaw tightened. My father stared at the paper like it might bite him. "I don't even remember authorizing that." "You did, twice, and once through a power of attorney you signed while claiming Elena was emotionally unstable." That word hung in the air. Unstable. It had been their favorite. My mother stood up abruptly. "We were protecting the family. Elena doesn't understand how the real world works." I did. That was the problem. The officers exchanged a glance. One of them spoke. "At this point, we're going to need everyone to remain seated while we make a few calls." Callum laughed softly. It sounded wrong now. Thin. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Maeve leaned back in her chair, unafraid. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. Men who mistake silence for weakness." The room felt smaller. Brielle suddenly looked at me, eyes glossy. She said, "I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted something of my own." I watched her carefully. You wanted what I built, and you chose to take it instead of earning it." Tears spilled down her cheeks. My mother moved to shield her like a reflex. My father didn't move at all. He looked older, smaller, like a man who had spent years pretending control meant certainty. The officers began separating us. One asked Callum's phone. He hesitated. That hesitation was enough. When he finally handed it over, his composure slipped, just for a second. It was all they needed. Maeve reached for my hand under the table. Her grip was steady. "This is the part where you breathe. The hardest moment is over." I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow, because no matter how deserved this was, the people unraveling in front of me were still the ones who raised me, who taught me how to tie my shoes, who clapped at school plays and then quietly taught me that love came with conditions. Harper caught my eye. She nodded once, not in celebration, in acknowledgement. Outside, the bay reflected city lights like broken glass. Callum finally snapped. "You think this ends here?" he said to me. "You've made enemies." I met his stare. I already had them. The officers escorted him toward the door. Brielle cried out his name. He didn't look back. My mother sank into her chair, face pale. My father rubbed his hands together as if washing off guilt. Maeve stood with effort, cane tapping once on the floor. "We're done," she said. As we walked out, the night air hit my skin. Cold, sharp, clean. It felt like standing under running water after years of dust. I paused on the sidewalk. For a moment, I let myself feel it all. The grief, the anger, the strange relief of being believed without having to beg. Maeve slipped her coat over my shoulders. "You didn't destroy your family," she said softly. "They did that themselves. You just stopped pretending." I nodded, throat tight. Behind us, the restaurant doors closed. Ahead of me, the city waited. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel small walking into it. 6 months later, the courtroom smelled like varnish and old paper. Brielle sat 2 rows ahead of me, her hair darker now, pulled into a low bun, no makeup. Her shoulders curved inward, like someone had folded her in half and forgotten to unfold her again. She didn't turn around. Callum wasn't there. His bail had been revoked after another shell company surfaced, linked to a housing scam halfway across the country. He was facing federal charges now. My parents were seated at the far end of the aisle. My father looked thinner. My mother looked like she'd stopped sleeping weeks ago. When the judge read the charges aloud, I didn't feel triumph. I felt quiet, like standing in an empty room that used to echo with shouting. The trust fund Maeve had built was fully restored, now protected with new clauses we'd written together. The Penthouse was back under my name, sealed tight from legal tricks. But more than the paperwork, what stayed with me was the silence from my family. Not a phone call, not a message, just absence. I thought I'd miss them. I didn't. After court adjourned, Brielle approached me in the hallway. Her steps were slow. She looked nothing like the sister who once wrapped lies in silk ribbons. "Elena," she said, barely audible. I waited. "I'm sorry." The words hung between us, shapeless and late. "I never meant for it to go this far," she added, eyes glistening. I was tired of being compared to you." I nodded slowly. "I know," I said. She blinked, surprised. "But you chose shortcuts. You chose lies. You chose to turn everyone against me and call it survival. And you did it with a smile." She said nothing. "I'm not here to hate you," I told her, "but don't expect me to forget." "I don't," she said. She walked away. I let her go. Later that week, I moved back into the penthouse. I changed every lock, opened every window, took every photograph off the walls. I wanted no ghosts here, no shadows pretending to be memories. Maeve came over with lemon tea and a small potted plant. This place needs green, air, and roots. I brewed coffee and we sat on the balcony watching the ships pull in. I've been thinking, I said. People like me, like us, we don't get warning signs. We just get accused of overreacting until it's too late. Maeve sipped her tea. I went on. So I'm starting something, a hotline, anonymous, private, for people who suspect financial manipulation in their families, especially women, especially daughters no one listens to. She smiled. You're turning your burn into light. I'm tired of people like Callum getting away with it just because they dress it up in velvet, and tired of families hiding theft behind loyalty. Maeve nodded. Let me be your first donor. I laughed, but she wasn't joking. By spring, the website was live. By summer, we had 6 volunteers, 3 of them survivors. I didn't make a speech. I just listened, over and over again. Sometimes the stories were near copies of mine. Sometimes they were worse. But every time I answered that phone, I remembered. I wasn't just someone who got back what was stolen. I became someone who helped others protect what was still theirs. That's what real payback looks like. Not revenge, prevention. One afternoon, I stood in the center of my living room, sunlight pouring in through tall glass. The same room where strangers once sipped tea like they owned my life. Now, it was mine, fully. No more pretending, no more proving. Just breathing, just being. And if you've made it this far, maybe this story feels like yours. Maybe you've been told to stay quiet, to not make a scene, to just let it go. But let me tell you something. Silence doesn't make you loyal, and speaking up doesn't make you crazy. It makes you free. So if this story hit a nerve, leave a comment. Tell me your moment, the one you didn't let them take. And if you're still watching, hit the like button to let this story reach someone who needs it. Subscribe to Still Waters Payback, because the quiet ones don't just survive. We strike.